Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument, hosted by the militant, Marxist, anti-Santa, Martyn Bradbury. The Bradbury Group is streamed live on Rover, Sky TV, YouTube and Facebook. Proudly sponsored by Wātea, journalism you can trust. Let the arguments begin.
Kia ora Aotearoa, the true demarcation of power in a late-stage capitalism, liberal, progressive democracy is the 1% richest plus their 9% enablers versus the 90% rest of us. And once you see politics through that lens, the left can never lose an election again. Welcome to the Bradbury Group Election 26, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. I'm your host, the editor of the daily blog, Martyn Bradbury. Bomber to my comrades, Mr. Bradbury if you're nasty. My pronouns are us and we. Coming up on this evening's show, the political panel all-stars tonight are leader of the Opportunities Party, Kulei Wong, the best columnist and stuff, Verity Johnson, and New Zealand Herald columnist, academic and political commentator, Matthew Hooton. Tonight's 1-on-1 and 10 is the Labour Party finance spokesperson, Barbara Edmonds, on the budget, the economy, and when can we expect policy from Labour. Our extra 1-on-1 tonight is the Māori Party political legend, Hone Harawira, on his decision not to stand for Te Tai Tokerau, why this government needs to be a one-term government, and the current state of Māori politics. Shout out to Kiwi Skirt and Chewy from BHN moderating tonight's YouTube page. Good evening to all the Bradbury Easters online watching right now. You make this show one of the most watched live podcasts in New Zealand, and your comments will appear on screen as we go. Shout out to Wātea, Facebook, Rover, Spotify, Apple Podcast and Sky TV whānau. Remember to like and subscribe because that's all that's holding the fourth estate together right now. And our Twitter panel this evening is Tim Sell, and he'll be tweeting live online at Twitter, hashtag the Bradbury Group. Before all that, however, is this week's War on News. Brothers and sisters, we are not racist in New Zealand. We just love white people and rich people most. Nothing highlights that more than the new English language test proposed this week for migrant workers we invite here to exploit. If you are a migrant worker we are exploiting, you must speak English, because how will you understand our Karens when they demand to speak to the manager? However, if you are a foreign rich prick buying a $5 million mansion, you don't have to speak any English at all because your money does all the talking. So just to make it clear, migrant workers we are exploiting speak English. But if you're buying a $5 million mansion from one of our property boomers, you can call us whatever you like, darling. Welcome to New Zealand. Talking of welcoming, Nashi gets New Zealand first pashy after bashy for slashy cashy, and Sean Plunkett's woman definition smashy. That's right, the Nashi's back. He's got that property boomer white snow hair and a fresh face that looks like he's been spearfishing with Barry Crump for the last 3 months. As New Zealand's second most compromised politician behind Shane Jones, the Nashi is back pimping for an old school pork barrel gangster like New Zealand first. It's the perfect combination, like gambling and meth. Nothing says wink wink, nudge nudge quite like sending your donors in the forestry industry cabinet notes. Nashi's charming definition of a woman is for those rugged types who like their masculinity with skin rash and bark. To say Stuart Nash is uncouth would be the kind of understatement that deserves its own public inquiry. New Zealand first takes money from regional economic anti-communist warlords, and in return they get the policy they want. So the Nashi is in for the cashy splashy. Now he's politically clashy. Will the Nashi self-mutilate himself before the election? Polymarket bet says yes. And finally this week, the government is convinced it can replace 8,700 public servants with AI, which seems less artificial intelligence and more budget cuts with Wi-Fi. National reckons AI can replace social workers because nothing comforts a struggling family like a chatbot saying, "Have you tried not being poor?" Nicola Willis thinks AI can handle mental health support because when you're at your lowest, nothing hits quite like a machine asking you to rate your despair out of 5. National's dream is a fully automated public service. No public, no service, and best of all, no one left to explain why it's not working. AI doesn't replace bureaucracy, it replaces accountability. The political panel All-Stars up shortly, whānau, but first this week's 1-on-1 in 10 with Labour Party Finance Spokesperson Barbara Edmonds on the budget, the current state of the economy and when we can expect policy after they've seen the books. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Oh, Talawhalawa, nice to be on, as always.
Babs, you know what does my bloody head in, comrade? We are facing a hard right government who have vandalised the economy with a free market ideology that has borrowed $14 billion in tax cuts, $3 billion in landlord loopholes, $300 million for big tobacco, $200 million for gas and oil, all while hollowing out public service budgets, and yet the media attention is on something you said in private about the finance minister. I don't give a flying shit what you said about the finance minister in private. I care about the students, pensioners, working class, the disabled, beneficiaries, generations locked out of home ownership, and the environment. Why should Kiwis be less focused on audio leaks and more focused on budget leaks, Babs?
I mean, the major thing is, right, this budget's going to be the last time and the last chance for this government to show they actually have a plan to get Kiwis ahead. I've had some really lovely messages of support and, you know, the common theme being is this is not what matters to us. Can you keep fighting for us? So,
amen.
Yeah, it is what it is. I apologised, but, you know, the focus this week is the government's budget, their last chance.
This government are promising to slash 8,700 jobs on top of the 9,500 they've already cut at a time when unemployment is double digits for Māori and Pacifica. How does slashing jobs create green shoots of recovery?
Well, we're already in high unemployment. It's just going to add to it, right? And the major thing is there's the baseline reduction plus the cuts to headcount. So maybe they're two separate things.
Yep.
Not quite clear whether they should be merged into one, but from what we've read, what we've questioned, it seems to be there's two separate line items. The problem with that, one is they say they're not going to cut frontline services to the public, but they said that the last two budgets, and, you know, I've got school-based nurses in Porirua and Wairarapa who have been cut from serving some of our most vulnerable communities. But then they've also said basically, well, we're choosing to still provide tax cuts for tobacco companies and for property speculators, right, but we're going to take from the poor to give a little bit more to someone else that's a little less poor. And, you know, the cuts don't make things better. It doesn't make you a more productive economy.
1.37 billion per annum increase to Health New Zealand's baseline funding. Is that enough to cope with an ageing and growing population? Because to just stand still, we've got to be investing $2 billion.
Yeah, and we want to see those numbers, right? They've said this is a major focus of their budget, is the health budget. Has to keep up with demographics and with inflation. You know, the numbers that I'll be looking at, obviously, is for those operational pressures, how they're paying for that. Obviously, the debt trajectory. Does this budget provide a positive fiscal impulse, or is it going to be negative? You know, so there's a lot of detail that will be covered, technical detail that we will have a look at on the actual day. But ultimately, again, I go back to that first point. This is their last chance to show that they have a plan for New Zealanders to get ahead.
How does raising state tenant rentals and throwing state tenants onto the street to face the private rental market helping those vulnerable families?
And that's my point. They're taking from the poor to give to someone less poor. Again, that doesn't help with productivity. The people, they need, you know, security of tenure, a roof over their heads to ensure that that was one of the key things that in my life ensured that we got ahead as a family. Yeah. Is because my parents owned their own home. So when mum died and dad had to go on a low income, we at least knew we had a community we could live in, that we could build, knew our neighbours, went to the same school. So it enables a huge amount of productivity because you are able to secure yourself in a community and society. Yeah. So this isn't going to help make us any more productive on top of other cuts to public services. And I say services versus servants because a lot of public services are delivered by both the private sector
Yes.
and non-government organisations.
Yes.
And we've already seen major cuts throughout the country
Yeah.
to a lot of those really key programs.
These are the jobs that National believe AI robots will be able to replace. School support workers, biosecurity officers, health workers, food safety inspectors, special education advisors, social workers who investigate concerns about children's safety, people who help young people into work or education, dock rangers, probation officers, court and tribunal staff, animal welfare inspectors, corrections case managers, early intervention teachers, caregiver social workers, public health officers, border control staff. How will AI do any of those jobs?
Well, AI can't cut my hair, and I'm not going to let AI, anybody with AI come cut my hair. But, there are definitely jobs where you still need a human. But even if you are going to use AI to replace the roles, well, what are those roles that you're cutting? Who's going to do those roles? If it's going to be AI, well, what's the plan on rolling that out? And what's the cost of that as well?
The Reserve Bank governor faces a difficult job this week. If she moves the OCR before the election, can the government continue their line that they are the better economic stewards?
Well, retail interest rates have already gone up anyway.
Yeah.
Irrespective of whether she held it in the last quarter. Ultimately, the monetary policy statement will provide, their perspective on the economy when they expect to see inflation ease or, peak at. So it's a bit of a double whammy this week for the economic nerds. I know Matthew's going to love this week. So, we're going to watch out for it. And there's, the external commentary from different economists, they're all kind of split as to whether they'll hold or whether they'll hike. And if they're going to hike, when will that hike be? Will it be in September? Will it be later on in the year? But ultimately, the Treasury forecasts as well will be interesting to see how they align with where the Reserve Bank thinks our economy is going.
We are all waiting to see the Labour policy. We've been told you need to see the budget. Now, how soon after the budget will we know what policies Labour plans to implement if they've got the privilege of winning in November?
I'm actually really excited about it. And I'm excited because we're going to it'll feel like we're we're starting the full campaign. So you'll see it shortly after the budget. I was not going to make the same commitment that Nicola Willis did, which was to put my job on the line if I couldn't deliver tax cuts without borrowing. She basically, the first budget, it was really clear there was additional $12 billion of borrowing for $10 billion of income tax cuts.
Yes.
No matter how many ways you cut it, it was still borrowing.
Right.
So I wasn't going to make that foolish decision. And I knew, after last year, seeing basically the trajectory of the economy, and then obviously things have taken a hit now, only in the last few months because of conflict in Iran. For me, it's just making sure we make some prudent, considered decisions, because the last thing I want to do is make a huge promise to New Zealand and fail on it.
Finally, Barbara, many whānau are just holding on and they feel a real sense of fear and dread for the immediate future. Can a Labour-led government make a meaningful difference for those whānau?
Absolutely, we can. And when we're doing, because we've started our direct voter contact and our new area of Kinapiru campaigns have started right across the country for the last couple of months as well. It's the messaging and the information that we're getting really strongly for them is, we need you to deal with the cost of living. We need to make sure that we've got a job that we can go to. It is health, it is homes. That's been our priority for the last year because that messaging has come through really strongly. So ultimately, we will have policies in every direct area to deal with that. But our whānau are finding it tough, even double income whānau. And I've been quite surprised when speaking to different food banks across the country. That's the new clientele that they've seen in the last year, which is the working poor. So you got to, and the government's in government right now, and they could have shifted. So, for us, still seeing that they're still holding on to tobacco tax breaks, that they're still holding to property speculators, but they're saying, actually, I'm sorry to you in social housing, we're going to have to increase your rent and we're just going to put it to someone else. Yeah, that's not a choice we would make.
Thank you, Comrade, for your insight and oversight. We'll speak with you again next month. We've got you on Wātea Afternoon this Thursday for your thoughts on the budget. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, ka kite anō.
Thank you, comrade. Hooray. The political panel all-stars up shortly, whānau, but for now, this week's extra one-on-one in 10 with Māori political legend Hone Harawira on his decision not to run in Te Tai Tokerau, why this government must be a one-term, and what is the current state of Māori politics. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful. Oh, I think he's mic'd. Oh, no, he's on mute. I think you're on mute. You're on mute. There we go.
I am. My apologies. My apologies, everybody. I'm surprised Barbara Edmonds allowed herself to get caught up with a red bag like you know.
Hone, why have you broken all our hearts and decided not to run for Te Pāti Māori and Te Tai Tokerau? Why have you done it?
You know, when Maria Meno stepped down and me too, she chosen her own path.
Yep.
I decided instantly we can't let this die. We've got to do something. So I went to media and sparked things up a bit, and then went on a Tai Tokerau roadshow just to get everybody interested again, and everybody was really interested. But I said all the way along that journey that going to Parliament isn't the be all and end all for me. That I have final commitments, I have work commitments, I have issues in and around home here that are really important to me, and I couldn't commit to it until such time as I'd settled all of that with Hilda and other members of my family and close friends.
Yep. And
in the end, along with the fact that a really good guy was standing, Apirahama, had put his name forward, Apirahama Edwards. And I had a chat to him. I says, "Are you up for this, bro? You know, do you really want to do this? You know how tough this is going to be?" He said, "He's up for it." I said, "Mate, I'll back you all the way." So, yeah, I know that there was a lot of expectation out there, but that was my job, really. Was to lift the game again.
You're too humble. You're too goddamn humble. That's why we need you in Parliament, damn it. Honey,
humility is not one of my greatest traits.
Honey, I've covered politics for over 30 years in New Zealand, and this is one of the most anti-Māori, anti-treaty, anti-environment, anti-disabled, anti-worker, anti-renter, and anti-environment government I've ever witnessed. Why do you believe it's essential that this is a one-term government?
I heard you say it's one of the worst. Well, in my reading of parliaments and governments over the decades, all the way back to when we first started them here, this is the actual worst for Māori.
I'll give you that.
There has not been another government that has been so destructive of things Māori, particularly given that the last 50 years have been a renaissance and slowly rebuilding the language, rebuilding the kura, rebuilding the land assets, and contributing now billions and hundreds of billions of dollars back into the New Zealand economy, and to provide that kind of vision and face and support for New Zealand businesses of all kinds all over the world, and for New Zealand businesses to say, the thing that sets us apart when we go overseas is our connection to Māori culture. Globally hot, locally not. Our government has gone out of its way, this government like no other, to destroy the language, to destroy the treaty, to destroy our land rights, to destroy our rights to our forests, our fisheries, and our very environment. So I hear you picking up on those issues around the environment. It's the reason why we have to make this a one-term government. And I'll say this, another thing about it. My greatest concern about allowing these guys to go back in is all of the damage that they have done to Māori in these 3 years. If they get another 3 years, they will have the opportunity to embed that in legislation. And children who are young now, by the time they are of voting age, all of the positive things, all of the gains, all of the relationships that we have built up with non-Māori up and down the country, most visibly noticed on the hikoi,
Yes.
the Toitū Te Tiriti, where me, for example, I was absolutely astounded to get to Wellington and to march from start to finish and realize a good 35 to 40% of the hikoi were non-Māori.
Yeah.
And so I know it's the right thing to do for the nation to hold fast to kaupapa Māori, to hold fast to those rights guaranteed. Because what's good for Māori is good for the whole of Aotearoa.
Right.
And if we can use the treaty to keep the land, if we can use that treaty to keep the land clean,
Yes.
to keep our waters clean,
Yes.
then those are of a benefit to all of us.
Exactly.
And this government, because they would embed it over the next 3 years, we must stop them now.
1 million.
And
1 million in
Carry on, sorry.
donations. 1 million in donations have come from companies with fast track projects. And Mike Smith has exposed the way the 7 big polluters got what they wanted in legislation. Has New Zealand politics become a place where the rich buy their own rules?
Mate, when National got in and gave $3 billion to landlords and then said, oh, well, they're gonna lower the rents for everybody. Oh, what? I don't suppose anybody in our part of town actually believed that. That was just a, thanks, guys. Thanks for putting us in, and we told you we'd give it to you. Here's $3 billion. Go and do what you want with it.
Right?
Hey, and they did exactly what they wanted with it, and not a penny of it dropped down to reduce rents at all. So that's exactly what this government is focused on.
Yeah.
Taking from the poor through the
Yes.
cuts in social welfare. And I hear you talking about AI. Well, you know, I know he's a comedian, but that Scottish guy, Kevin Bridges,
Yes.
he's got this excellent skit on the economy and how a guy, you know, really his body's so broken and so bashed up and can hardly move. And he said, yeah, well, there'll be a farmer out there, you know, would want to hire you as a scarecrow. You know, it's that dopey. I've seen in Kaikoai, when I was in Parliament, a guy who'd been really hurt in the forestry.
Yeah.
Could hardly do anything.
Yeah.
And when they did an assessment of him, they said, well, yeah, there is a job that you could be doing, and that's a car park attendant. Now, car park attendant in Kaikoai, for God's sake, ain't any job. And then when said to him, but there's plenty of those jobs in Auckland. Go to Auckland. How ridiculous is that kind of thinking? And that's the kind of thinking that underpins this whole theory that social services can be flicked off to AI while we pay taxes so they can go to keep supporting the rich.
Are we seeing...
And at the end of the day, when I hear talk about finances, really simple. Tax the rich bastards to feed the poor. Tax the rich to feed the poor.
Preach.
Tax the rich to feed the poor.
That's why we got you on the show. Are we seeing a splintering of pan-Māori solidarity? Mariamino has set up her own party. Doc will stand as an independent. There are rumours circulating that Hana is about to start her own party. And there was a confusion over who Oreni was standing for. Are the Māori electorates moving towards being iwi decided rather than party aligned? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we, as a Māori party, are still young.
Yes.
I think we're still making mistakes. I do believe that we have issues within the party that have not been well worked through.
Yep.
I think there are issues in the leadership. I think there's issues about people at the ground level being able to participate. That's why I've been really enthusiastic about what we've done with the Tai Tokerau electorate and putting it out there and just seeing how much support there really is.
Yeah.
They want it. They want it desperately.
Yeah.
But our job is to focus on what it is that we're doing, hearing what they're saying, talking about, you know, the cost of living and housing, access to decent health, you know, education and opportunities and job, and climate change, the environment, and of course at the bottom. And I say at the bottom because every Māori believes it. Doesn't matter what party they're in. It's the treaty. You might know what bloody Shane's saying, what Winston's saying, what Seymour's saying. You know, at the bottom of it all is the belief that those treaty rights are inherently good for every Māori, and by so being, they are also good for the whole of our society.
If the
So
right,
those are the issues which are important.
If the right win, it's likely to have Winston as Prime Minister for 12 months. What happens to Māori aspiration if National, ACT and New Zealand First do get back into power and we've got Winston as Prime Minister?
Yeah. So, and I already see him lining himself up to take shots at National so that he can build his base off National and separation from ACT and all the rest of it. And I just say to everybody, list all of the things that he said over the last couple of years. List all of the things that he's done over the last. God, he's traveling overseas telling us we're not even bloody Indigenous. You know, he's an embarrassment. He's an embarrassment to Māori because he himself and Seymour, they can't speak Māori. So they have to go out of their way to try and downgrade the status of Māori because they can't themselves lift themselves to a level where they should be able to be positive contributors to Māori society. And so they trash it, they smash it, they slash it. And our job is to stop them in their tracks and say, one-term government, you bastards are gone.
Finally, Hone, what do the Greens, Te Pāti Māori and Labour need to be doing right now?
Really simple. Looking in the mirror and realising that, you listen to this, Chippy, Barbara, and asking yourself this question. Chippy, do you really think Winston is going to go with you and with the Greens? The answer is, you know what it's going to be. Yeah. Winston's going to play it off so he doesn't get 12 months, he gets 2 years as Prime Minister.
Right.
That's his plan.
Yeah.
The trick is to stop the bugger in his tracks now and say no. And then to realise that the ones who will back a return to those principles, those practices, are the Māori Party and, of course, our colleagues, the Greens.
Yeah.
Our brothers in this kaupapa, our brothers and sisters in this kaupapa, the Greens, and truly believing that is the one coalition that if we back it intelligently, and I'm saying strategically, Chippy, get your shit together, brother. Get out of the Māori seats, let the Māori Party hold those seats and lift the number of seats that we're going to have in the coalition government. Because if all we do at the end of the day is fight one another, all we're going to do is kill our ability to be that coalition government.
Preach.
And if you don't change that thinking, Chippy, you don't change it, you set yourself, you set the Green Party, you set the Māori Party for another 3 years of these pricks embedding the kind of legislation which is destroying our world.
Thank you, comrade, for sharing your insight and oversight this evening. We'll catch up shortly. Thank you, Hone.
See you, brother.
Okay, now to our political panel all-stars. Our first panellist is the union rep for Slytherin House. He makes Machiavelli look like a virgin, and he's the only New Zealand right-winger not on the Taxpayers Union payroll. Perpetually joining us from a secure, undisclosed location, for reasons we can't disclose, New Zealand Herald columnist Matthew Hooton. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Hopeful, initially. It was a week where the Minister of Finance, Nicola Willis, made a dick of herself talking about State House tenants winning lotto, and Barbara Edmonds from the Labour Party, she made a dick of herself with the, the duck-faced horse comment. And these things were noted in the media, but the whole political class didn't dwell on them. We actually just said, well, that happened and no one really cares. And the minister said she was sorry for making a stupid comparison. And some of the media continued talking about the upcoming budget, the upcoming official cash rate issue, rather than dwelling on stuff-ups by two politicians who are much better than that and usually are.
Our second panellist is the fresh-faced political hope of an entire generation locked out of home ownership. She's for all those children of National Party parents who are too rich to vote Green. 50% House Hufflepuff, 50% Ravenclaw, 100% universal basic income. I think that's how the math works. The leader of the Opportunities Party, Kule Wong. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Kia ora. Well, 3 words, but all the same. Money, money, money.
Money, money, money.
I'm looking forward to my first budget day in the world of politics.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many announcements already that we've been analysing. All a little bit, some good stuff, but all a bit late. And I think that we'll have lots to say come Thursday.
Looking forward to it. And last but certainly not least, she's our most tolerable millennial voice. Inner city business owner and recreational girl boss, she is currently writing some of the best political columns of her career. Totes House of Gryffindor. Staff columnist Verity Johnson. Kia ora, Conrad. One word to describe the week, please, ma'am.
Exhausted.
Yeah.
I am so over this. I can't do another 6 months. I'm seriously sitting here being like, I can't write about it. I can't say anything else. I need something different. I think I have the average level of the public's tolerance right now for any form of political or budget-related chat, which would be minus 14.
Your columns are so good at the moment. Jesus. Honestly, the last 12 months have just been wow. Brothers and sisters, let's get into tonight's show. Issue 1, the big polluter scandal and Luxon threatening John Campbell. Issue 2, OCR versus budget versus economy, who is winning? And issue 3 tonight, English before Māori, defining a woman and arresting the homeless they've created. How does any of that culture war garbage grow the economy? Plus, we'll have a final word at the end of the show where each panellist gets to go to the mountaintop to see who breaches broadcasting standards this week. My money, as always, is on Hooten. Let's kick things off with issue 1, and that is the extraordinary scandal exposed by environmental activist Mike Smith in the role 7 big polluters had in extinguishing a legal challenge allowed by the Supreme Court to sue big polluters for climate change. Matthew, there is a meme quoting you from the Working Group 2024 podcast that I was hosting that has been doing the rounds on social media this week. I had nothing to do with that. And it says, it has you quoted saying, the current National Party in its current formation exists to stay in power and deliver corporate welfare to its donors. 5 of the 7 big polluters Mike was suing have all made donations to National Act and New Zealand First. Has democracy become so corrupt that the climate criminals can now have the rules written for them? And when should citizens start violent revolution? Your thoughts?
Well, the first thing is I must correct myself, obviously, when I said that the National Party exists to be in power. That's wrong. The National Party exists to be in office. It's not so interested in exercising power. That's too much work. So that's why sometimes it outsources some of its policy development work, or most of it, to
all of it,
to other organs in our society. Well, I don't know if they had much luck, but on the lobbying issue, what this is, it sounds to me, is a non-paper, is what it's called in the lobbying game. A non-paper is always published on paper, as opposed to a paper, which usually isn't published on paper, that could be sent as a PDF. So a non-paper is always on paper.
It really sounds like Yes Minister.
Well, the idea of a non-paper is it doesn't officially exist.
Right.
And what it is when 2 people have a conversation and one perhaps describes this type of legislation which they are interested in and seeing considered. And because it can be difficult to remember, even if it's only 2 clauses long, exactly what the lobbyist is so seeking, it can be useful to give them a non-paper that just summarises the things that were said. And in many ways, that's not it's similar just to it's similar just to recording the words that are said verbally. Of course, words said verbally and memories in the minds of officials and politicians are also subject to the Official Information Act, so it wouldn't actually get around that problem.
Kool-Aid. John Campbell asked the Prime Minister at RNZ the following question. Is it okay if corporations are having a direct impact on the wording of legislation? The Prime Minister then threatened JC, saying, well, I'll be careful saying that, John. I reject that characterisation completely. To which JC responded, how do you know if you've never seen this document? What's most surprising to you? A, the Prime Minister threatening an interviewer. B, that the Prime Minister can't remember seeing donors' wishes which his government magically implements. Or C, that the PM is familiar with the word characterisation. Thoughts?
Oh, none of that is surprising.
None of that?
None of that? I can't say any of it is. There's so many issues in here. I mean, lobbying, I just think we've come to accept it as part of New Zealand society, and we need to expect better than that.
No one has a problem with interested parties wanting to have a say,
but we have
right?
we have really fast and loose regulations around this,
right.
and so we can do so much better just to be on par with the rest of the world. It shouldn't be that hard. So I think that's something that we as citizens also need to take some responsibility for and make sure that we hold our politicians accountable for that, not let it slide when our fisheries are dominated by commercial interests. We know why that is. And so, I think that we as citizens need to look for who is going to advocate for stronger lobbying laws in future.
Because National Act in New Zealand First sure as hell won't. Sure as hell won't. We've seen that. We're seeing it in real time.
Yeah.
They just went, out of it.
Yeah.
Verity, the Prime Minister says there's nothing to see here, mostly because it's hidden from the Official Information Act and was discovered only as part of discovery in the High Court. But if the big CEO in the Coro Club gives it a thumbs up, why are we lefties bitching and complaining about such naked venal corruption as the planet burns?
I feel like there's only one way to answer that question. I mean, I don't feel like there's... Thank you for giving me such an open-ended and generic general sort of question.
What do you think?
I think it's so dispiriting. Part of this exhaustion that I mentioned earlier is because I feel, you're right, Q, a lot of us feel as though lobbying has just become an accepted fact in sort of political society, and that this loosey-goosey kind of, we're not going to regulate it too much because no one really gets it, has become the norm. And it's to an extent where people sort of, the average person on the street has no concept of how lobbying even works in a practical sense. And because there's no civic awareness of that, it's very hard to raise awareness about that. And even if I start talking about lobbying or whatever in the press, people would still be like, I don't get it. There's not enough baseline knowledge to even begin the discussion. And that's exhausting.
Yeah. Quick round to all of you. What will happen first? John Campbell gets sacked from Radio New Zealand, or Luxon cancels the weekly RNZ interview? Matthew?
I think the latter's the more likely, that the Prime Minister will feel that he has other means of communicating, which wouldn't necessarily be to his advantage, because the quality of his social media work is absolutely atrocious. And, every time I'm starting to feel sympathetic towards the Prime Minister, I go to a social media site and there is a little video from him, and I decide that I really do need to go and vote for the Libertarians this time.
How many times can he do a interview with Mike Hosking? I mean, is he going to permanently sit in there on his lap?
Well, I think they're more conversations than interviews, where which is a different style of media, where the Prime Minister and Mike Hosking have a discussion each week, and often there's interesting information to the listeners that come out from that conversation. But it's of a different type of event in the media than what would normally be described as an interview.
Kule, what's going to happen first? Is John going to get sacked, or will the Prime Minister suddenly be too busy? I don't know.
I mean, I think John Campbell is almost like a national treasure. You would hope that they wouldn't go that far.
Right? You hope. It's like, we're not at that Trumpian level yet, are we?
Yeah.
Verity, what's going to happen?
I think he's going to stop doing it. I think,
Poly markets, get the poly markets. Comrades, we need to move on to issue 2 tonight, and that is Budget 26 as the Reserve Bank Governor sets the OCR as the economy continues to wilt. Kule, the government is promising to slash jobs and cut the public service at a time when people need jobs and public services. How masochistic does the National Party believe Kiwis really are? 1 to 10 being the highest.
Oh, I just think that it's so, I mean, it's short-sighted. I've worked in corporate worlds where we've had big redundancy rounds. Everybody knows that it's bad for morale and it's bad for productivity in the long run.
Yeah.
And what was interesting with this is we were sort of talking about it internally and looked at the case study of the IRD, which actually had this big tech transformation program. It took them 10 years. They spent $1.5 billion. And now, as taxpayers, we save $100 million a year because of that. But it took a long time. And it took successive governments working together to implement this plan.
Yeah.
It's not a rash thing that they're expected to happen overnight. And so I think Nicola Willis from her Fonterra days should know better than this.
Follow-up question. 1 million of political donations for this government have come from firms linked to fast-track applications. Is morbid cronyism the only way you get ahead economically in New Zealand?
Again, I think we really need to strengthen our lobbying and transparency laws around all of this. It's it's fast and loose, the Wild West out there with this stuff, and we need to crack down on it.
Verity, 6.6% unemployment in Auckland, 600,000 Kiwis needing food banks each month, 200,000 Kiwis have already left the country in the last 2 years. Home ownership is out of reach for almost every generation under Boomer, 180,000 kids in poverty, and we've had the highest level of liquidations in over a decade. You're a business owner. What are you seeing in the economy right now?
Can you infer it just from that groan?
Yeah.
I don't think I need to say any more words.
That's just like a lot of pain.
Yeah. Can I just scrape my nails across a table and we'll just do a close-up of the...
I want to see how Facebook and YouTube bring that sound up.
Yeah.
in the
Maybe we need the column.
Yeah. I feel like you just summarised all the columns I've written for the last 6 years. How would I summarise it? I was talking to the Cairo Business Association dude, Jamie, who's a real cool dude.
Good
and we
people,
were talking,
good people.
like they do amazing work.
Yeah,
and we were
yeah.
talking about how K Road is kind of the canary in the coal mine for disposable income.
Yes.
And, like everyone right now, you can feel all of our asses are clenched real tight because we know that June, July, which is historically bad, is going to be absolutely awful. Like we can feel it coming. There was a massive. So I remember being on air in August last year, and I was talking about how there was a 60% drop in retail and hospo spending in the last quarter of that year when we were talking about it. And I know friends who went down from doing $6,000 a night to doing $900 a night. And that is not a drop you can pivot out of. Like the sustained loss. And you're talking not just 1 month of August, you're talking 6-7 months. Picked up in summer, back in April to the pre-winter of last year.
Yep.
It's just, you can't function. There's not enough cash and people cannot spend because the money proportionally now goes on your credit card towards groceries and petrol. There's just not that disposable income.
Yeah. Follow-up question. The new Ipsos survey out today shows that Labour is most trusted to fix 7 of the country's top 10 problems. Labour top the inflation question, healthcare, the economy and housing. So why are the polls showing a razor-close election?
Because people don't trust Labour. They fell out of love with Labour in the long lockdown of 2021. That's when Auckland broke and it didn't come back. And because they haven't been doing anything for the last 3 years, it's been duck and cover and say nothing and hope no one pays attention to us and let Luxon hang himself. Because they haven't said anything right when we needed them to say something. They haven't won us back. So there's nothing really to work on. I mean, we don't like Luxon, but we're not going to go back because you haven't changed. So where do we go?
I thought you wrote an incredible column on this very topic where you were saying we were in love with Jacinda and she broke our heart.
100%, yeah.
And you're so right about that. It was a personal hurt.
Yeah.
We believed so much in Labour. We wanted Labour to do so well. We gave her an MMP majority mandate that no government had ever had. And while they may have won the COVID, they lost the peace.
Yeah.
And people are still feeling that, right?
100%. Yeah, I don't think we recovered from that. We fell out of love. I think it wasn't just Jacinda personally. It was the sense that the government was transformational, but then never brought about the transformation that it promised.
We're still waiting for the transformation we were promised in 2017, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just her. It was more like we're going to be the government that finally speaks to generation rent, that finally speaks to younger people under 50 who don't own a house. But I just don't think that Labour understood the way that it broke our hearts and therefore has not learned how to change its message to recover. It's not buying us flowers. It's not coming over and calling our mum and saying, come on, help me.
Matthew, Paul Goldsmith and Nicola Willis believe AI can replace those lazy Wellington bureaucrats. How will National Skynet do those jobs?
Well, I mean, there are many thousands of bureaucrats who I wouldn't describe them as lazy in the sense that they do rush around, but they create nothing of any value, and their skills would be better deployed in other areas in the private sector, perhaps in hospo. So it's not a question of the jobs being replaced. The jobs shouldn't be being done. Well, they aren't being done. I mean, they aren't jobs. They are simply, in many cases, and they're none of the things you listed at the beginning of the show and the PSA's making. These are literally people who are paid money by the taxpayer to have coffee with one another and whiteboard things and design policies which will never be implemented, and if they are implemented, won't deliver any benefit to anyone. So AI shouldn't replace those people.
How will
because that activity shouldn't occur.
How will right-wing Skynet? I mean, I think of the Terminator, and I think of the Terminator Voting Act, and it terrifies me. I think
AI is just another tool. I mean, it's not like here is a job and now AI will replace it. I mean, AI is the biggest transformation and probably a greater one than when the internet came along in the mid-90s and became universal by the end of that decade. And that changes everything in a way, but no one can plan for it, least of all the little government down in the bottom of the world in New Zealand. I mean, the idea anybody in the New Zealand government or anybody indeed in the whole world, including Silicon Valley, has any idea how AI will change the nature of work is living in a utopian fantasy. So when the printing press gets invented, when telex machines get invented, when whatever these things are, it changes everything.
Yeah,
but not in a way that you could have a binary choice.
Follow-up question. The finance minister proclaimed state house tenants have won lotto when challenged on new policy that will throw state tenants on the onto the street. She's right, isn't she, in that you have more chance of winning lotto than getting a state house under this government, right?
No, the statistics don't support that. It's easier to get a state house than to win lotto.
I want to see the numbers. I want to see the numbers. I actually want to see the numbers. I want to see the math.
She had a point. She did have a point, and it was a stupid thing for her to say, but her point was that those that get the state house receive much greater assistance than those that get other forms of housing assistance. But it was a stupid thing to say, and she apologised for it. And as I said earlier, politicians do say stupid things, and let's sort of accept that's part of life and worry about the substance a bit more.
Quick round. Each budget gets a nickname. What are you calling Budget 26?
I'm going to go catfish budget.
Ooh, that's good. I like that. Verity.
Oh, boomer budget.
Oh, that's even meaner. Matthew.
Denial.
You
could call every budget since 2008 a denial budget, but there we go.
I'm calling it the sell it, strip it, starve it budget. Comrades, we need to move on to issue 3 tonight, and that is English before Māori, defining a woman and arresting the homeless this government have created. How does any of that culture war garbage grow the economy? Verity, how does demanding English before Māori, how does that help grow the economy?
It doesn't. And I don't think that any of these policies were done with the specific aim of anything except distracting us long enough and getting stuck in these stupid discussions that would distract everyone from the fact that we haven't got a better plan for growing the economy. It's not going to raise our productivity. It's not going to form a replacement for a stalled housing market. It's not going to massively increase our solar exporting panel. Nothing. It's a massive smokescreen, and the more we talk about it, the more they win.
Who is that piece of legislation for? There is a chunk of Aotearoa New Zealand, mostly white, who feel that if they can't understand the weather report immediately, like there's a Māori word first, then it's the end of Western civilization. Is that who this is driving for? Because I don't see this as a really big issue that anyone else cares about.
It's interesting. That subset of New Zealand has always been there. The entrenched anti-Māori sentiment has always been there. I remember being on air and them telling us off for saying taupo and then being like, let's taupo, and people would call us to complain that we were pronouncing it wrong. But so that sentiment is baked into New Zealand's culture. I don't think it's as big as they suggest it is. I don't think most normal mainstream people do not feel that level of anger. I think radicalised people who've been watching too much YouTube and potentially might be your dad or your granddad.
Reality Check Radio. I blame them and the platform. Matthew, how does arresting the homeless that their emergency housing policies have directly manufactured, how does that help grow the economy?
well, these issues are complete sideshows. I don't care about any of them one way or the other, and it is embarrassing even to be talking about them. Occasionally, some homeless people should get arrested. Usually, they shouldn't. And as for which language comes first, it's just embarrassing even just to discuss it. I think on those first two issues, maybe Parliament should respond as they did to the official English as an official language bill, which was a complete waste of parliamentary time and made no effect on everything. So everyone just voted for it unanimously on the grounds that English really was an official language and Parliament was merely codifying that. So the important thing with most of these issues is not to react to them, because they're not serious proposals. What they're designed to do is get certain people to react to them in a way that is deemed politically advantageous to usually the New Zealand First or ACT Party, or in some cases the Māori Party.
Do you think it is appropriate that Parliament, the most powerful bastion we have, is spending time putting together policy and law to beat the bejesus out of the weakest people on the street? I mean, arresting people for homelessness is just...
I don't think that's what Parliament's doing.
That's a very, 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 very nice thing of you to say. Verity.
Present.
Not Verity. Culé. How does defining a woman help grow the New Zealand economy?
Yeah, on the one hand, I just don't want to give oxygen to these kinds of conversations because there's no good intention there around that legislation.
Bingo. There's no good intention, It's bad faith. It's bad faith policy.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I do think it's important for people to be vocal and say that this is bad faith.
Yep.
And I think it goes back to, I think that there is a silent majority of New Zealanders who believe that but don't say it because they just turn on the news and they're like, what? This is this is politics? This is what they're fighting about? Yeah. And so they tune out. And so I think it's time for those people to say, no, we do not want to see that kind of politics anymore.
It feels like there aren't any adults in the room. I mean, I'm looking at this legislative lineup and just go, how in God's green earth can you justify this?
They're pretty old, but they're not really adults, are they?
No. It's like... like very old people in nappies. Okay, quick round. Will the Reserve Bank Governor hold or raise the OCR tomorrow?
I don't care. I don't care. I don't want to have these conversations.
Matthew.
Hold.
I just think we're going to stop talking about inflation and start thinking about how we're going to change the economy because we need some big radical change.
Yes, we do. Good call. Comrades, we need to wrap the show with a final word. Culé, your final word this week is?
Tribalism is killing New Zealand. It is killing our productivity. It is killing our young people's hopes for their future, and it's killing politics overall. So we need to stop with the tribalism.
Preach. Verity.
I know that this is probably not the audience, but like the unengaged among us who probably don't listen to this podcast, but let's pretend that you do for some reason. I was thinking about what St. Augustine said about how hope has two daughters. One of them is anger and the other one is courage. And I would encourage anyone out there who is feeling a little bit browbeaten and exhausted to remember that we need to have anger and courage to face the year ahead.
Oh, she's good. She's coming back. Okay, Matthew, your final word this week, please, sir.
Well, listening to the two interviews earlier on, they were largely slogans. There was not much content on either of them. And it does seem to me that there's just a complete failure to accept that New Zealand has become a poor country. That's why the social stats are bad. People get this around the wrong way. We have become a poor country. We face multiple crises, productivity, fiscal, environmental, race relations, and many others. And all we hear all too often is that these are all problems which vote for me and they'll be changed, and none of them will. And I can't even get emotional. Hone Harawira was trying to get everyone emotional. Let's get rid of this government that's destroying New Zealand. No, it's not. It's not doing anything. And if the government changes, that government won't do anything either. And it's a downward spiral. It's very, very sad.
Oh, chin up. Thank you, comrades. And now to my final word. Brothers and sisters, this is the Bradbury Group's 1-year birthday. A little cake. Yeah. I started this podcast after the funding was pulled for my last podcast because I wouldn't stop criticising Israel for committing war crimes so extreme that they technically breached genocide thresholds, and because I refused to stop focusing on the New Zealand right-wing think tanks and their connections with the media and political class. We weren't sure if anyone wanted to still come along for the ride, but we now have tens of thousands of viewers each episode across all of our platforms. Our thanks to you, our audience, Watia, our sponsors, Rover, our studio, Sky TV, Spotify and YouTube, our platforms. We'll keep fronting if you keep watching. Here's to the election. In solidarity, the revolution continues. Ka pai, Aotearoa.
The Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. The Bradbury Group is an independent podcast through the Rover Network, sponsored by Watea News. Everything on the show is an opinion and shouldn't be taken seriously enough to attempt defamation action against us. We were joking. We're never serious about anything. And officially, a small wetter in Avondale is legally the owner. Good luck finding him. Don't forget to follow, like and comment.